Our Earth from above. Dominating this perspective, a vast tract of land sweeps across 2 continents and 11 time zones. A confederation of states, which, despite recent defections, remains the largest political entity on Earth. This land is often described as Russia. Yet, as recent events have brought clearly into focus, Russians are but one of more than 100 ethnic groups in this confederation. A kaleidoscope of 290 million people speaking over 80 different languages. They are the human face of the Soviet Union. The rural heartland of southern Russia and Kalinin, a vast collective farm. The broad, fertile plains of the Russian steppelands. Formerly grasslands, they are now the food basket of the Soviet Union. The seemingly endless steppe is divided into huge collective and state farms. Each itself subdivided into lesser units which radiate from central workstations. One of these farms, Kalinin Collective, is both home and workplace to the Petrenkos, one of 6 families in the Icebreaker series. At one of Kalinin's workstations, Sergei Petrenko services a farm harvester. Sergei's heritage is Ukrainian and Cossack, the fierce horseman warriors of the steppes. Today, the steppes are roamed by combine harvesters. At the farm's dairy unit, Sergei's wife Zina is checking over the breeding stock. She's a senior milker with an additional responsibility for the summer calves. With the farm managers, she selects which cows will provide next year's calves. Sergei Petrenko Jr. is the oldest of the family's 3 sons. He is supervising the construction of an irrigation canal. As an agricultural college graduate, Sergei Jr. is involved in the collective's planning and management. It is to the young and the educated farmer that the Soviet government now looks to improve the poor results in agriculture. Sergei Jr.'s wife, Natasha, is an agricultural chemist. They have just had their first child, and Natasha is on maternity leave. That gives her time to help run the household for the rest of the Petrenko family while they're at work on the farm. Back at the Petrenko farmhouse, the younger sons, twin brothers, are home from college for the summer vacation. Gennady is studying law. His chess opponent and brother, Zhenya, is training to be a mechanic. The Petrenko family live in the town which is at the center of Kalinin Collective Farm. It's a community of 8,000 people. The roads are unpaved, but other services are provided, including the daily copy of Pravda. Self-sufficient, but not affluent, and just a little picturesque, it's a country town typical of many thousands in the rural Soviet Union. political hoardings and statues of communist leaders are a reminder that this village was part of a dramatic experiment, the collectivization of agriculture. This is a meeting of its elected council. Kalinin Collective is jointly owned by all those who live and work on it. It's not a state farm, it's a cooperative. Its citizens share in its profits or suffer in its loss. But this collective has one great natural advantage. It's situated on the Chenotsion, the rich humus soil which spreads from the Ukraine into Siberia, a belt of more than 5,000 kilometers. These are the great and relatively wealthy Russian croplands. This day, during the late summer harvest, is a special one for the Kalinin community. The people are gathering at the town hall for a collective ceremony. The newest members of the farm's population, half a dozen babies, are about to be registered. Sergei Jr. and Natasha bring their 3-week-old daughter Lena for registration. It's a secular occasion with ecclesiastical similarities, a state substitute for a religious baptism. Faith, of a kind, is invoked. The woman official extols the fortunes of being born in the Soviet Union.
Петренко Сергея Сергеевича и Натальи Ивановны совсем недавно также произошло радостное событие. Так, пожалуйста, отец.
Once the register is signed, medallions and the birth registration certificate are presented. And there are material rewards from the collective to its new citizens. And some entertainment from some not very much older. So far, the registration of Sergei's granddaughter, baby Lena, has been an official and civil one, shared by her parents. Now Sergei, home from the fields, is in time to join the family's own celebration. It's far less formal. Russian champagne flows freely, and the table is well stocked with their own and the collective's produce. It's a traditional time for family celebration. The West has heard a great deal about glasnost, openness, but there is also an ancient Russian instinct for sobornost, togetherness. The occasion brings forth a traditional Ukrainian folk song. The ballad says that beyond the clouds at the end of the village, there your loved one waits for you. Then the tempo is lifted with music long associated with the Russian steppes, a Cossack dance. The modest Petrenko farm cottage provides for cramped living when the whole family is at home. While the rest of the family sleeps off the previous evening's party, Sergei Sr. feeds the family's ducks and chickens. At home for their summer vacation, the twins share the living room couch. And if Sergei Jr. and Natasha thought they could lie in, baby Lena has other ideas. Let's go to Papa, says Natasha. Like many young married Russians, they must share the family home, in their case, until assigned a farm plot of their own. This is what Zina and Sergei had to do 25 years ago when they were first married. Outside, there is more room to move. Each house in the Kalinin Collective's town is set on its own large block of land, enough for each family to grow crops for themselves and to run a few farmyard animals. Although these living arrangements are far from ideal, they're better than those experienced by many city dwellers. There's been a Soviet housing crisis since the war, when 6 million homes were destroyed. Pressures on family life can be acute. This leads many young rural Russians to leave the farms for the supposed benefits of a city lifestyle. Gennady says that when he qualifies as a lawyer, he'll return to the collective farm. But he's unlikely to. Since the revolution, there's been a steady drift to the cities. City people have long regarded those on the land with disdain. They usually earn less, and rural education is considered inferior. Zhenya, training to be a mechanic, is more likely to return to Kalinin. There's a desperate need for machinery engineers on the farms. The Russian family car is solid and reliable. Not so reliable are the farm machines. Over 1 million people, more than those employed to build Soviet farm machinery, are paid to repair them. To help keep the young on the farms, the collective provides a range of services for its workers. Baby Lena's healthcare, as for all the family, is free. The doctor visits regularly. Lena is easy to undress. Russians don't use pins and diapers, just a simple cloth wrap.
Эту в сторону красивую пеленку понятно. Тяжело, да? Конечно, прямо на тебя, да? Дыхание немножечко жестковатое. Да? И посидела. Ну вот у тебя даже старается уже даже.
The doctor comments that Lena's breathing is a little laboured. The prescription, some gentle massage. Out in the fields, Lena's young dad is checking the results of re-sowing. Kalanin Collective has 11,000 flat and fertile hectares of rich soil. It's among the most productive farmland in the world. That's on paper. Real farm production has been growing far slower than the planners' targets. And this is despite the allocation to agriculture of about 1/3 of total government investment. Kalanin, for instance, has the benefit of sophisticated irrigation systems, but the Soviet Union in general is still failing to provide its increasing population with enough food. Natasha arrives at the collective's daycare centre to enrol Lena. Keen to return to the workforce, Natasha will leave her child in daycare once her standard 18 months maternity leave is over. The provision of free daycare is generous. Children can attend from their second year until they go to school at 7. Daycare is part of a cradle-to-grave welfare system, which is now straining for funds in a stagnant Soviet economy. Natasha enrolls Lena for next summer. For this summer's harvest, reluctant machinery is coaxed into life. With production targets to be met, it's the busiest time of the year on the farm. Despite the apparent fertility of this land, Soviet imports of food have remained high. Grain harvests over the past few years have been about 30% less than planned for. Food production, especially maize and other grains, has increased, but not fast enough. The problem is complex. Partly it lies in the lack of research and development for better crop strains, more productive and hardier varieties. Food handling technology is also underdeveloped. And distribution is another aspect. These steplands are vast distances from the cities. The transportation problems and the poor handling mean enormous wastage of fresh produce like tomatoes. 1/3 or more of the fruit and vegetables harvested rots before it reaches the consumers. Self-sufficiency is a feature of the huge collectives. This is not a touring company, but Kalanin Farm's own dancers and musicians. They entertain the farm workers at lunchtime, and of course they perform at official ceremonies too. Sergei can identify with them. He was once a Cossack performer himself. The farm also has its own art studio. Most commissions are for numerous posters and placards, the social and political slogans which substitute for the commercial hoardings of the West. Poster art is still a very strong form of cultural expression in the Soviet Union. But much of the work is standard, using stencils supplied by central or federal authorities. The posters produced here announce events, celebrate harvest quotas filled, and congratulate award-winning workers. Kalinin, like all collectives, does everything for itself. Sometimes, though, self-sufficiency is not so much bold new economic practice, merely traditional rural village life. Zina's home is of the age-old Russian traditional village farmhouse design. The kitchen is in a detached building out the back. Like the main house, it's simple and Spartan. Adequate enough, though, for Zina to make a traditional Russian snack. Cake and tea from the samovar.
Это что, это не поймаешь.
Почему?
Да, она
Сюлиска длинная, на короткую ставлю.
возьми, посади же.
Да.
Taking a break from farm chores, the three Petrenko brothers have the Saturday afternoon off. They've decided to spend it fishing. But first, there's some essential work to be done on the tackle.
Гармошка, когда будет подплывать. Поплавахай. Короткий трохи был.
The Petrenko boys won't be the only ones. Farm kids the world over know just how to spend a Saturday afternoon. There are plenty of good spots for fishing around the Kalinin collective. Its flat and otherwise featureless land is dotted and laced with irrigation lakes and canals. It could be a Saturday afternoon scene from rural anywhere. And the Saturday night which follows shows too just how alive young Russians are today to Western influence, its fads, its fashions and frivolities. As the late summer harvest is gathered in, the work of preparing the soil for the next season gets underway. For Sergei Petrenko, the patterns of the rural year are determined by a chain of bureaucratic decision-making. At the lowest level is the planning of his local workstation to meet farm production targets. His son, Sergei Jr., is second in command at this farm station. Here, the work schedules and planting plans are drawn up for the new season. At this meeting, fertilizer needs are being discussed. The top dressing plane is one of the few pieces of equipment not owned by the farm. It's leased from the federal airline Aeroflot. During refueling, the pilot wryly questions the farm's refueler about smoking near the aircraft. The preparation of winter stock food looks like a scene from an old communist poster. Ideology may have changed, but rural life has not. Despite the machinery, collectives are still very dependent on manual human labour. The image of toiling workers overflown by an ancient biplane seems somehow symbolic of Soviet progress in agriculture. The problems of Soviet farming are not simply about producing more food. More critical concerns are quality, variety and distribution. The distances these products have to travel within the USSR are immense. These apples are as far from Athens and Vienna as they are from Moscow, and some will have to travel the equivalent of London to New York. At lunch on the farm, food is basic, but relatively plentiful. There are sharp regional differences in food availability in the Soviet Union. The farm labourer of Kalinin undoubtedly has more choice and better quality food than most industrial workers in Soviet cities. Diet, health and fitness are increasing concerns in the Soviet Union. The federal government believes that a change in attitudes is needed. It exhorts its citizens to drink and smoke less and to take more physical exercise. The image of the athletic young Russian is misleading. The average person by middle age is prone to be overweight and unfit. The collective farm has a well-equipped sports complex. These boys belong to Kalinin's gymnastics club. The town provides not just the hall full of facilities for many sports, but also a full-time sports director who administers the hall and all the clubs which use it. For Soviet children, opportunities for sport and cultural activities are more concentrated and organised than in countries which rely more on individual initiative.
38, 39, 40, 41, прямей, 42, прямей руку, 42, 42.
This public sports day has been organised by the sports director for all ages.
Первая среди девочек, не запоминайте, девочки, первая среди...
Zhenya tests his arm at weightlifting.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. Ну, дожимай.
For others, there are events not so physically demanding. Checkers, like chess, is seen here more as a sport than a game, and played with the same aggression.
1-0. Все ясно.
The Petrenko twins reached the final of the table tennis competition. There's a strong competitive rivalry between the two brothers. The face on the award certificates is one of the world's best known, though Lenin may be less likely to appear in future. Gennady gets one, and a prize for the table tennis.
Абрамовская Лена, пожалуйста, Лена. То же самое награждается почетной грамотой и ценным призом. Подковку на счастье. Мероприятие заканчивается. Спасибо за...
Gennady's parents have decided to quietly give the sports day a miss. At home, they tackle the family laundry. The washing machine is fairly primitive by Western standards, but new machines are scarce. The shortage of consumer goods, including clothes, is seen as one reason that Soviet farmers lack incentive to earn more. They have little to spend extra income on. Soviet reformers believe there's a great deal of inertia in the countryside. Harder work for uncertain promise of greater reward holds little appeal. Getting by is enough. The Petrenkos, like all the farm's families, have their own substantial plot of land behind their house. They're not only able to raise the pigs and poultry, but also able to grow a wide range of vegetables. More effort is often put into these private plots than into the collective farm. The small family gardens are very productive. They total only 3% of the country's tended land, but produce 30% of the food. Facts like this are quoted by critics of the system who say that nobody will work for an abstract concept as hard as they will for their own family. A farm bus takes Zina to the dairy station for her evening milking shift. Because of the hours she works, the family usually eat their evening meal without her.
Теперь это салат, Наташа.
As Natasha is on maternity leave, most of the meal's preparation falls to her. Men and women are legally equal in the Soviet Union, but social tradition has still largely kept men out of the kitchen. Younger Soviet women today demand more domestic role sharing, particularly as they're expected, like the men, to have a paying full-time job as well. At the dairy station, Zina milks Kalinin's herd. Milk and butter are not in themselves staple foods in the Soviet Union. Bread is usually eaten without butter, and a shortage of refrigeration makes fresh milk impractical. The milk yield will be processed into other more popular products like sour creams, yogurts and cheeses.
Тебя заставляли 2 раза пробовать, а у меня ни разу. Тебя
At
заставляли 2
home,
раза.
the rest of the Petrenko family eat their evening meal outside. It's nearly 8 o'clock, but the summer evenings are warm and long. The meal tonight is meatballs on a bed of lokshina, rich egg noodles.
Давай скорее, я же умираю. А мне?
With limited space inside their four-roomed house, it's more sensible to eat in the garden at this time of year, and more pleasant.
Мне помидоры нельзя. Почему?
Деда заставляешь на кино сходить.
The long growing season on the southern steppes provides produce almost year-round. Early travellers marvelled at the size and abundance of fruits and vegetables in these cottage gardens. A melon dessert is a refreshing end to the sultry evening. Summer temperatures on these continental plains reach the high 30s, still warm enough for an after-dinner dip. When the harvest's over, Callan Collective and all its neighbouring farms join together to celebrate the Harvest Festival. One of the performing groups is from the Ural Mountains. The particular folk dancing may be unfamiliar here in the south, but the other activities of the fair are not. Horse racing, a popular event for plains people who identify themselves as Cossacks. The Cossacks were not a separate ethnic group, but literally free men. They fled the serfdom of the Russian kingdom for the life of frontiersmen in southern and eastern Russia. This area was Cossack heartland, and Cossack traditions are kept alive in song and dance. Back at the farm, it's not a time of celebration for the chickens. They form part of the collective's quota purchased by the federal authorities. A state-owned regional consortium buys most of the farm's produce. Grain is offloaded into the consortium's regional silos. Callan Farm was directed to produce this grain by the federal authorities. This command-style system was imposed when Stalin collectivized agriculture. Reformers now seek to change this highly centralized way of doing things. The direction of food production and distribution from a central bureaucracy has proven to be unwieldy and inflexible. Recent reforms seek to give more decision-making power back to the farms themselves. Meanwhile, it's still the regional consortium which not only owns the distribution facilities, but also the processing plants and the abattoirs. Salami are produced by the thousand at this plant, but have become a scarce commodity in the distant Soviet cities. Under perestroika, a more market-driven discipline is being introduced. A form of farmer enterprise occurs in the regional markets. Here, produce surplus to the state quotas mixes with that grown in private plots. In contrast to the state's city stores, here there is variety and plenty. The food and flowers are more expensive than in the city shops, but the buyers are offered choice and quality. With the current city shortages, people travel considerable distances, if they can, to buy fresh food at these country markets. They're an example of the local enterprise the government is seeking to encourage. Kalanin Farm is only 160 kilometers from the Black Sea and its resorts. Here, collective farmers can become collective holiday makers. What were once the resorts of the Tsarist aristocracy are now vacation playgrounds for the proletariat. Sergei, Zina and the twins arrive at the end of the summer harvest for a few days' break. It's been a 3-hour drive from home to the resort of Novorossiysk. Left behind in Kalanin, Sergei Jr. and Natasha still have work to complete and baby Lena to look after. The others are welcomed at reception, but there's a fair amount of form filling before they're given their rooms. Internal Soviet passports are still required for travel within the Soviet Union, even though the Petrenkos have not journeyed outside their own region. Until recently, Russian rural people were denied the privilege of this internal passport, effectively restricting them to a 40-kilometer radius from their homes. For a family used to cramped conditions, there's a good deal of pleasure in the facilities the hotel has to offer, even if they're unpretentious by Western standards. Sergei and Zina's room has twin beds. Double beds are rare in the Soviet Union. For farm boys from the steppes, the view has two important features: hills and sea. Gennadi's comment? This is great. In summer, the Black Sea resorts are normally crowded with Russian holidaymakers. It's a kind of Soviet Riviera. Zina and Sergei have one long vacation every year, usually in autumn, a quiet season on the farm. But they take weekend breaks at other times of the year as well. More than a holiday destination, the Black Sea also produces the Soviet Union's finest sparkling wines. Methods of production not only look traditional, they are. Last century, the Russians discovered a Black Sea valley that enjoyed similar climate and soils to that of the Champagne region in France. A complete French champagne winery was transported here, vines and all. Today a state enterprise, the Abreu d'Ossau estate makes one of the finest Méthode Champagne wines in the world. A local rosé, however, is sufficient for the Petrenko family. They're not a wealthy family, but they do enjoy a simple yet comfortable standard of living. The collective farm of which they're a part is, in Soviet terms, successful. They're able to share in this success. Farmers and agriculture are now getting pride of place in the reforms of perestroika. Modern ways, however, are still largely a veneer. The Petrenkos are the inheritors of a strong culture with age-old traditions. They're farmers, part of the rural backbone that has sustained their country through all its 1,500 years. It's the hope of the modernizers that rural reform will lead to a more prosperous future for the country and for those who work on its land.